So yeah, up next we have Dan. He's going to be talking, as you can see, no, you can't see behind me. He is going to be talking about how serverless technologies can help SEOs overcome legacy and modern. It's got to that stage of proceedings. I'll let Dan read, because he's probably better at that than me. If we give him a big welcome to the stage, everybody.
Hello, good afternoon everyone, and yeah, being honest, when I was asked to speak this year, I wasn't expecting to be on a stage this big or in the afternoon when most of the hangovers will have worn off. And if any of you still are hungover, then kudos, that's impressive. So a little bit about me. I am a senior consultant and account director at Salt. We're based up in Leeds, office in London. Also behind the Tech SEO podcast, which was a little bit short-lived last year, but we are going to restart it again and actually get it indexed on some podcast apps this time. And also behind hreflang Checker and Sloth, along with the rest of the team at Salt. So what I'm going to talk about today is really something we presented at Boston last year, and that is this concept of Edge SEO. And the concept of Edge SEO really is just about doing SEO through CDNs, bypassing the actual server stack, the MarTech stack, and not really circumventing DevOps, but just kind of finding that edge case solution where necessary. So what a CDN actually is, as I'm sure most will be aware, it's essentially a network of multiple cloud servers you upload your site to, and in theory, it pings a server or a cache response of your website closer to the user, and they come with many actual out-of-the-box benefits, including some speed, bandwidth optimization for your server itself, content optimization and your uptime availability, especially if your actual servers are made of rich tea biscuits and fall over immediately. You get some security benefits with your WAF, DDoS protection. Most common use I see from is just people reverse proxying WordPress blogs onto the end of platforms without good set platforms, and then the Edge SEO stuff. So a lot of people have actually asked me all the time why we actually need to do Edge SEO. And the simple fact of the matter is it's challenges we all face day to day. It's development queues which are backlogged with multiple fixes. It's the actual lack of business buy-in to investing and finding an ROI when necessarily isn't by direct correlation. There's platforms out there which, let's be honest, are just restrictive and don't allow us to actually get the things we want from or apply what we want. There's builds, which we all know aren't scoped properly, and then the dreaded code freeze. So how this actually works is very simple. You have your browser, make a response to your server, and all that sits in the middle is the CDN or the cloud technology, as we want to call it. All we're doing is modifying that little bit in the middle, so to the user and the browser and Google, we're getting what we want, but at the same time, we're not having to invest into the DevOps. An example of this is implementing hreflang in this way. So on the left, you've got the browser response. So to Google, to the user, to third-party validation tools, first-party tools, the hreflang is present. But if you take a direct server response, we've actually not implemented hreflang directly on the server or on the website. That might be because we actually physically can't, the platform doesn't allow it, the development queue to do it's 8 months long, but we need to get the hreflang on there, and that gives us that workaround that actually is validated by Google, works with Bing, and allows us to actually implement international SEO. So when I spoke about this last year, Cloudflare were very much the only kind of name in producing essentially what they call the Cloudflare worker. Now they're different to a service worker because a service worker is JavaScript, but that just executes in the browser and does wonderful things like push notifications that we all love and the various other little triggers. The space in about a year has grown a hell of a lot. Later this year, Akamai are releasing their own form of edge worker. Fastly are also building one in WebAssembly, so WASM, and Lambda, the AWS front, have also got their own solutions. In the middle, we've got third-party applications. We have Sloth, which is the one we built, Spark, which is Chris Green's, and Logflow, which is in the Cloudflare App Store. These all basically mean that you don't have to be able to write performant JavaScript to make use of this technology. On the other side, we've already got distilled ODN and A/B rankings. Yeah, I'll take the 500 quid after. So we've got distilled ODN and A/B rankings, which allow us to actually do changes as well. Not necessarily through the CDN, but again, it's a bypass of that DevOps stack, so it falls into the edge category. Putting this on a table format, this means we can actually do many things which we might not necessarily been able to do before. For example, log file collection through Salesforce Commerce Cloud is a nightmare, but soon we'll be able to potentially do it through all 4 major CTM providers. Worker code cases differ a hell of a lot, and it basically is situation dependent. So common ones we come across are redirects, so things like Git pages don't support them, so you need to be able to migrate that properly. A/B testing, overriding metadata, hreflang, even down now to dynamic pre-rendering of JavaScript, which is something I'm going to go on to in a little bit. So examples of this in action, so the standard one using distilled, very, very bottom of HTML page, a little JavaScript rewrite, means that you can have a dynamic title tag pulling through cheapest information onto the SERPs automatically. Again, redirects, it's just a little code snippet, it's very simple to do, and it helps it if you are running limits in your htaccess file, or you just have no other means of implementing. The log file collection element is interesting because the 2 main culprit platforms for this are your Salesforce and your Shopify. When you collect the logs in this way, you essentially get a standard log, but as opposed to taking it from the server, you're taking it from the initial request as Googlebot hits the site. The issue, however, is with Shopify, which was one of the main sites we devised this solution for, they're grey clouded at the moment with Cloudflare, meaning that any edge technology with Shopify at the moment is not possible, simply because no traffic passes through the Cloudflare network, and it's been that way since about January this year. So hopefully with Akamai and other methods, we can resolve this, but at the moment, we're stuck with Shopify as it is. A/B testing again. Without being able to do the actual live changes, if you want to simply do your old redirects based on traffic, you can just do it through the edge, do it 50-50, split rules, and just pass traffic easy enough. And that can easily be done through things like the Sloth backend. I'm pretty sure it can be done through Spark as well, or just simply by actually implementing the JavaScript directly onto the CDN. So the fun thing that we've started using with Sloth at the moment is actually the pre-rendering of JavaScript in a dynamic fashion. So we know that JavaScript pre-rendering can be expensive, it can be complicated, it can be fraught with many other issues. So a way around this, I'm being honest, this next diagram is pretty much for developers, but the way around it essentially is using Cloudflare workers to take a cache version of URL based on a sitemap and then serving the cache version through a Google Cloud function to the actual search engine itself, and then allowing client-side rendering for actual general users. In simple terms, when the request comes in, we need to actually first identify where the request comes from, whether or not it's a search engine or just a native user. As with dynamic rendering, if it is a search engine, we check the actual cache we've got stored in Google Cloud, an S3 bucket, somewhere else, for a cache version of that page, and we return it. Alternative is, if there's no cache available, I'll go on to the options there. If it's just a general user, we give them the client-side rendered version of the page. If there's no cache, we first of all build the worker to trigger pre-rendering. Now, the important thing here is we have to monitor the time it actually takes, because if we're asking Google to render a page and we're doing 7 seconds to load it, that's ultimately negative, and we're showing Google that the page is slow to load, might impact rankings performance. If we can return it after 1 second, there needs to be a trigger to do something else. So when we're caught short, we then tell it to return a 503. Now, the interesting thing is we've tried this with crawl delays as well, and also return afters, but when we work it that way, we can officially say, here's a 503, come back in 10 seconds. Correlatively, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but by returning that 503, we've not actually said to Google, this isn't pre-rendered, this is slow, it's negative. With cold caching issues, we essentially have to look at doing a batch on a chronological basis. So with this technology, for most sites, a lot of core pages don't change that frequently. So we do a crawl, upload a sitemap. This can be an automated crawl process. Those URLs are then stored and cached every 24, 48 hours. And for more frequent caching, obviously that can be set to go higher. If you're using the sitemap, obviously there's more restrictions because we have to make sure we're updating the sitemap. We have to make sure XMLs are updated and have to make sure there's no issues with them originally. And if we're crawling the site again, we have to have a little bit of human interaction in there just to basically make sure the process is occurring and happening naturally. So aside from the actual technical elements of things, one other thing we've noticed in the past year of implementing this with clients and working it on different bases is that actually this is a new solution to existing problems which don't marry up with existing processes, both in terms of marketing teams, in terms of development deployment. And being honest, most developers aren't even aware of this technology existing. So the pros we need to understand, first of all, are that the workers themselves, Cloudflares are in V8 JavaScript. Akamai's, I believe, are going to be finalized in V8 JavaScript in November when Edge workers release. Fastly's in WASM, so we need to understand the languages and if we're able to actually control and verify that on the output. Within Cloudflare, Akamai, it's a simple one-click deployment pullback, which is again bringing its own issues, which I'm going to go on around about account access and actual stability of infrastructures. There is next to zero DevOps required, but to stress this isn't a circumvention of developers. Developers need to be involved in these processes because, as described in the cons, there is a very small potential to implement new front-end bugs to systems. So if we're going behind developers' backs and they're doing various pushes to the site from other sources, we need to make sure that what we've tested is working on a staging environment before pushing to production. There is a possibility to add some additional latency to things, but I mean, it's between 10 and 50 milliseconds. What we've actually found is if you've got a naturally slow website anyway, it's going to be closer to 50. If you've got a fast website, it's closer to 10, if not negligible. This is why also the internal processes are important. So because this basically introduces a whole plethora of risks and potential mismanagement, and let's be honest, if someone goes into the back end of Cloudflare and doesn't know what they're doing, they could pretty much take a site down. So this is where you need to do processes more around responsibility and accountability of how this is handled within a business. That can be part of the change management process. So again, involving developers, if there are deployment calls weekly, fit it in around that schedule as opposed to making new processes around it. Through testing, we might have to develop new debugging processes because obviously it's a new implementation method. We might not be able to pick things up in the traditional ways depending on what's being implemented because, being honest, there's multiple things you can do with this that we haven't even explored yet. There's a security aspect as well because we are changing the request between the server and the browser response. Now, Edge can be used to implement things such as cause policies, cross-site scripting policies and everything blocking them that way, but still, we're adding in that extra element and we need to just be conscious of that, involving InfoSec, make sure that they know this is happening. And then also there's a compliance aspect as well because based on some legal things you might have to, especially with GDPR, data passing through Europe versus data passing outside the European Union, the traffic has to pass through the CDN to make this work. Going back to a further earlier point, restricting access to a CDN I found in most businesses Sometimes it's tight, and there's absolutely no way of getting control of it whatsoever, which is good. Others, anyone can pretty much log into the back end of Cloudflare and do what they want. With this, and especially when you're implementing changes through the CDN to the live site, this needs to be locked down or have a process around it so that effectively there's responsible individuals with accountability around it, and not everyone can just go, oh, I want to change the title tag, let's just do it through Cloudflare, let's just do it through Akamai, and bypass a defined process. In Cloudflare backend and everything else as well, not only just around the edge stuff, but it also affects things like if you're passing your SSL through Cloudflare, you can immediately decrypt your site. Similarly, I've seen in some WAFs before, Cloudflare's got the ability for you to go in and add a WAF rule and effectively just block a country from being able to access your website, which I have seen people do because they don't want to ship items to America, so they just block America in Cloudflare and wonder why the site is not ranking anymore. So that's really where we are in terms of edge now, and where we can go in the future essentially is down to what we're able to do in terms of processes. The technologies are there, and most websites run on CDNs, whether it not be Cloudflare, Akamai. There's rumors in Capsula are also producing things like this, but it's essentially, we're limited by our own processes. For most websites out there, you'll never ever need to do this. You'll have development teams, you'll have WordPress plugins, you'll have modules on Magento. Absolutely fine, no need. But this is the edge cases where being able to implement hreflang could potentially reverse a trend and potentially over a year save jobs, increase revenue. So it's those edge cases and helm areas, and being honest, it's also fun to play with, implementing banners, overlays, etc. So I will be putting these up on SlideShare afterwards, but here's some further reading on where we're at the moment. There's also some good pieces on Search Engine Land by Detlef Johnson as well. And I also recommend reading the stuff by Chris Green as well from Strudic IQ. So, yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.